Hi, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us for today's webinar on crafting a standout resume. This is our May webinar in a monthly series hosted by Aspen's Alumni and Career Services. I'm Allie, and I'm your Alumni and Career Services Specialist. You can find upcoming events and see more resources we have to offer on our website, which I will drop into the chat. This webinar is being recorded and it will be uploaded to Aspen's YouTube channel and emailed to everyone who registered. For this presentation, please feel free to unmute and ask questions throughout the presentation if you would like to, but otherwise, please keep your microphone muted. You're also welcome to use the chat to share comments or ask questions, and we will also have time for questions at the very end. I am so thrilled to have Corey Williams as our speaker today. There's really no one better to talk about how to write a strong resume. Corey works as a human resources generalist for Aspen Group, which includes not just Aspen University, but also our sister school, United States University. I'm very grateful to have you with us today, Corey, and I will hand it off to you now.
Thank you, everyone. And thanks, everybody, for joining. I really do feel really honored that I was asked to present for you guys. And something that's so great about this is I get the opportunity to tell you the things that HR people won't generally tell you. So a little bit about myself. I started my career in something very different. I started my career in television production, but in our production office, I always ended up doing the HR stuff. And through my career, I started working with schools. I became a dean at one point, and then ended up in an HR role. But I loved the HR that was woven things. I've also been an adjunct since 2004. And of course, that I teach, the students have to go and volunteer and they work on their resumes during the course. And so I wanted to take some of that and share with this group on kind of to get started with the resume and some transferable skills and some ideas and connections you might not have thought of before. All right, can everybody see this presentation?
Looks good.
Okay, great. So getting started on your resume and your career search. The first thing I wanted to start with is this transferable skill that everybody has, and that's doing homework. You probably never thought about that as a transferable skill, but it can be. So I put together sort of a process on how to approach going and looking for a new job or applying for a job and keeping your resume updated. So it sounds really silly, but the first thing that I wanted to share was make yourself a worksheet. And this worksheet is going to be a tool that's going to help you go through the job application and the job posting and get everything ready to go from applying for the job all the way to interviewing for the job. And this will help you get in that mindset. So the first thing you do is start with the job posting. There's a lot of information on that job posting that's going to be really important for your resume. So we're going to get started to get yourself in the mindset. So this is going to sound really silly, but the first thing I would recommend doing is write a short summary of your career field. What is that career field? What are your goals? What do you want to do in the field? Once you've done that, write a second summary, and it's going to be about the position that you're applying for. So while you're doing this, you're getting your mind kind of fueled to write your custom resume and your cover letter and all of that. So what I would first start with is looking for those keywords on the job posting and including those in your resume. That's going to be important because that is going to be what drives someone reviewing a resume to match it to a job. So they're going to be looking for keywords throughout the resume and the cover letter and the job posting. It's also going to be important to applicant tracking systems, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. So going through and looking for the keywords, you get the opportunity to look at what the skills and the qualifications for that job are. And once you know that, it makes it a lot easier to approach putting your resume together. Um, so, are there requirements on that job posting? So, something that I do when I post jobs, depending on the role, is there might be a cover letter that is required. And that really could be the first line of screening in some of these jobs. So, those who don't put a cover letter may not have their resume reviewed because of that. They didn't meet the qualifications. Once you've reviewed for the skills and the requirements of the jobs, how do yours align? What have you done in your career or where you're working or in school or a volunteer opportunity that is going to give you some transferable skills? So if you're entering a new career field because you've just graduated, you may not have a lot for your resume, but you've got previous jobs or you've got something that you've done somewhere else that could be that transferable skill. Then I would recommend on your worksheet to scan similar job posts. So what this is going to do for you is it's going to give you a more well-rounded view of what the job is calling for in the industry at that time. It also may help you find another opportunity. So who else is hiring for that job? What if they pay more? And you just didn't see that job posting at first. So spend some time and scan a couple other job postings that are really similar. And then on the last piece of your worksheet, I would recommend researching the most asked interview questions and create some answers for those. That's going to be really important because when you go into an interview, you already have these answers in your head. That's going to let you go in more confident and more focused and be able to thoroughly answer those really tough kind of impromptu questions that get asked. So that's kind of what I would recommend starting your worksheet with. And then you can use this again and again and again as you find other jobs to apply for. So before I move to the next slide, does anybody have any questions or comments or anything?
Hi, this is Janet. I do have a question.
Yeah,
So
go
in the
ahead.
beginning, you said write a short summary of your career field, and then you
Uh-huh.
said write a summary, summarize the position. Are
Yeah.
both of those going into the interview, or that's just for my worksheet?
That's so you're gonna do that for yourself. So you wouldn't turn that in for like an interview, but what that does is it gets your mind ready to write your cover letter. So you already know, like if I were to ask something about that career field, you've already researched it. So you're gonna be able to say, oh, this career field does this, and that. Does that kind of help out? It's mostly about just getting your mind ready
For
and
the particular position. Okay, I
yeah,
get it. I get
yeah,
it.
yeah. And then you do the same for the position itself. So what about that position um, is going to be important, or if they asked you something like, well, how after you've looked at this job posting, what do you take away from this position, or what do you understand about this position? And then you can just rattle it off, and that's going to make you look super prepared.
Okay, sounds good.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so this presentation actually it kind of continues off of each slide. So I tried to make it flow better. So now we're going to talk about building your resume. So you've done your worksheet. You know the summary of the company. You know a summary of the job. You know the keywords. You know what you're going to put on your resume. And now you got to do it. So that's the other part where I know a lot of job seekers, and I've had this myself in my career. You sit there to write your resume and it just is blank and you just don't know what to put. So here's some tips I think will really, really help with that. And these are things that I've helped others when they've asked for some assistance. So think of your resume like a living document. So I know that sounds kind of strange, but every time you get a new skill or a new experience, update your resume. The way you're going to create a winning resume is it's got to be customized. So I know some of us were taught, you just have kind of a general resume ready to go. And that's okay for some things, like maybe networking, but maybe not so much when you're actually applying for the job. So the first thing I would say is get a template. Don't reinvent the wheel. There's a billion templates out there that you can use. But be careful of those templates that are overly complicated. So I know that we've all seen those ones that are really fancy and have a lot of tables and you can fill in a bunch of stuff. Those can get a little bit tricky with formatting because there's tables set up in there. And sometimes job seekers will use a template and not update something on the template, so it still shows the brackets for what should go there. So really a clean resume is the way to go. So I wanted to highlight that. So select a clean and organized resume style. So each time you find a job to apply for, you're going to go back to your worksheet. You're going to go through that. From there, it's going to make sure you're listing all of the important skills and the keywords. So if a job posting says something like Google spreadsheets, make sure your resume says Google spreadsheets. Make sure all of that is in there. And the best, and I review resumes and I know a lot of other recruiters, use bullets to give examples of how or what you did in that position. So what I've seen on resumes is I'll see something like, I answered the phone, for instance, but I answered the phone using an Avaya phone system with 300 lines and I transferred, 200 calls a day with 98% accuracy. So that is what fills a resume, and that lets the reviewer know, okay, this is what they did. So if you think back to probably writing APA papers, which we're probably all familiar with, it is about that sort of concrete detail to back up your things. So I would say whatever skill you have, put an example on there. And one that I'm actually thinking of was a resume. And unfortunately, it's not the best example because the person wasn't offered the job, but the resume said he was a sandwich artist, and he did work at Subway at some time. And then after that, he wrote basically making sandwiches. And I thought, I'm basically done reading this resume when I saw that. So, I worked a busy lunch shift or something like that is a little bit better than just saying that. Pay attention to formatting. So we all see phone numbers different, but it's a good idea to keep some of the standard formatting. So with your phone number, it should have a prefix, it should have the area code, and it should have either dashes or periods in it, or the parentheses around the zip or the area code. Just when you see a resume that has a long series of numbers on it, that doesn't mean anything to me. So is that a job number? What is that? So make sure you're keeping that as more of a standard format, along with your states. So make sure that you have the correct state abbreviation and that it's listed correctly. And then tip on here is try to fill as much of the page left to right, top to bottom as possible. That's going to be a much better presentation. It also is going to allow you to really add more meat and to your resume and give them some examples of what you've done exactly. And the reason that all of this is so important, and we've actually tested this, my boss and I have tested this recently. The average first screening of a resume by a human is less than 6 seconds. So imagine a big stack of resumes. I've got to go through them. And if I've got to try to look for skills or look for experience, I'm probably going to pass on that candidate and go to one that actually shows it. So that's end of this slide. Any comments or questions?
I do have a quick question, but I want to give our guests a chance in case anyone else does have one too. Okay, I'll go ahead. I have found that it's more of a challenge to get my resume and other people's resumes down to one page rather than fill a whole page.
Okay.
Do you immediately pass on resumes that are too long that go into a second page, or do you have tips for shortening things that are too long?
Not necessarily. So if it's got more than one page, that's totally okay. What I would say, my tip would be though, is to really look at your resume and see what things can you remove. So do you have jobs that are more than 7 years old? So if they're an aged job, you can remove that to free up some space. If it's more than 7 to 10 years is what I would say. I would also go through and see what extra verbiage you have. We'll get to some of this, but there's not a need to put a line references available upon request. That just takes up space. And this is controversial, so get ready. Don't put a summary. So that's the biggest space taker, I think, on a resume. I would recommend having a cover letter that's really great and not having an objective statement or a summary. If you need the space, of course, include one. If you want one, include one, but look for that. And then also go back through your jobs, and maybe there's one that's just not really relevant that's on there. So remove that job. Does that give you some ideas on saving some space?
Yeah, that is super helpful. Thank you. Would you, so I guess my immediate concern of moving a job that's maybe not so relevant, especially if it's like a more recent position, maybe it's not super relevant to what you're applying to now and you need to save space on your resume, but will there be a problem with there being like a year or a few years gap between positions if you're taking one out?
Sure. That's a great question. So that there's a couple of things. So if it's an obscure job, but the keywords are underneath what it is, you've done something that's in the job posting, and you can justify it as a transferable skill, then add it, then keep it. That's what I would say. And then I'm sorry, the second piece of that question,
Yeah. If you remove a less relevant position for the sake of space, but then there's a gap showing between positions, like years that aren't spoken for what you were doing, would you maybe explain that in your cover letter or hope for time to do it during an interview?
You can. I will probably all. I would have some just kind of standard verbiage ready to go on why there's a gap on your resume. What I can tell you is that was a really, really, really important thing not too long ago, where it was like it's got to be a succinct resume, but then the pandemic happened. So now we do see gaps on resumes. So it sort of normalized that. So you may run less of a risk, but I would still have something to say, kind of like with your standard interview questions of how are you going to approach that if asked, look, there's a gap on your resume. What was going on? Oh, I was in college. That kind of takes care of it.
So thank you, Corey.
Anyone else before we move on? All right. Here I just put together a little table of do's and don'ts for your resume. So we'll start with the do column. Do put your name and your contact information on your resume. Yes, I have to put that on here because yes, I get resumes with no contact information or name. So if I'm a hiring manager and I just go into my applicant system and pull out all just the resumes without looking at the applications, I'm not going to know how to contact that person. What if you're the best candidate? Be very careful. I listed again, format your phone number and your state in a standard format. Make sure it's correct. A professional email address. I think it's really important now because I think all of us have multiple email addresses, but now's the time to have one that's probably more professional. So just your name, if you can, would be good. Only list relevant experience. So again, it's okay to remove some jobs if they just don't align with what you're applying for. Use transferable skills when needed. So that's going to be how you're going to fill in your resume with those bullet points. And then customize your resume for each opportunity using that worksheet that you've done. And have your references ready, but don't put them on your resume. They will ask for those in the screening process or the job application. There's no need to keep space on your resume for those. And then have a clean and organized template. So that's the best way to go with it, is to have a resume that's very easy to read. It's really organized. Someone can scan it in 6 seconds and get a good idea of your job and your history. And then create a cover letter that can be customized. So just like your resume, don't spin your wheels on that. It's okay to use a cover letter template, but have it ready in a way that you can take out some words and mix it up and make it specific for that job. Don't be that person that has one that they've used before and they turn it in and it still has the previous company's name on it. So that's why I say really, really get one that you can customize. And here's some of the don'ts to do. Don't put your picture on your resume. So that is a newer trend that has come up. And I just caution everybody on doing that because you could be opening yourself to potential bias in the screening process. So think about EEOC and what is covered in there and make sure that those things aren't on your resume. It also just takes up space. Share your complete home address. Don't share your complete home address. What that does is it gives a company the ability to see where you live. They may Google your zip code, and if it's a position that you've got to drive to, if the company thinks that's too far, they make that decision, and then they may not offer you an interview. Only it's totally okay to stick to your name, your phone number, and your email address. That's totally okay for your resume. Then they won't know what part of the town you live in or wherever you are. And that lets you have the power to say if it's too far of a drive or a commute or not. Another thing that I would don't in the don't group is put dates on your degrees. Putting dates on your degrees might allow someone to guess your age or how long you've been in the career field. So no need to do that, but only list degrees that you've earned. If you have a college degree completed, there is no reason to have your high school information on there. It's known that if you went to college, that you went to high school, and that's another space saver for your resume. Don't make something up. It happens. People have done that. We see resumes like that. It's just not a good look, especially if a company does a background check. So if you said that you've worked at a certain place and you've done this, this, and that, but they can't validate that, that could compromise your ability to take that job or to have that job offered to you. Don't use the same resume as is all the time. Change it out. Use those bullet points and put those keywords in there. So you might find that you're using the same jobs and the same bullets, but maybe the keywords are different. Maybe you switch them out a little bit so it matches. Don't put references on your resume. It's a big waste of space on there. Plus, it also puts your references contact information out there. So, not everyone is on the up and up. So you might be giving out their personal contact information, which might not be a good thing. Don't have an overly busy and complicated template. So it's going to be really tough to work with. It's going to cause problems for applicant tracking systems, and it's probably going to be really hard to update. Then don't use an online cover letter verbatim or a dated one. So one that you've already used over and over and over and over and haven't ever really updated, not a great idea to use that. But I am aware of a couple of the templates of resumes in Word because we get them and we read them, and it's like, this is a very interesting way of saying that, and we can spot those. So it's okay to use those, just customize it, make it your own. Oh, I forgot to ask, anyone have any questions or thoughts or ideas?
We do have a comment from the, oh, I'm so sorry. I was speaking over someone else. Go ahead, please. Maybe not then. Okay, something from the chat. Charles, listening from Vancouver, has asked that we please talk about ageism and how to use it for leverage. You already mentioned keeping dates for your degrees off the resume, but is there anything else that you can tell us about as far as ageism in the application process?
That's a really good question. Ageism in the application process. I think start with your resume and make sure that nothing on it is going to give it away. So, if you put, years of experience, that might, give some away, but don't put your birth date. I've seen resumes with birthdays on it. Don't put your graduation dates on your resume. I think it is smart to put dates on your jobs, but you should only be using jobs that are probably within the last 7 to 10 years. So everything should kind of look within the last 7 to 10 years without being able to identify that candidate as in any protected class. So I shouldn't be able to tell anything from that. So I would just say be careful of what you put out there. I would also double check what's on your social media. So if you've got something on your LinkedIn page, for instance, that could give away your date, that's one thing. A birth date shouldn't be asked in the application process before an interview happens. Unless they extend an offer, then you would need that to be employed. But I think where people mostly go wrong on that can give away their age is they put something in their degree area. I really notice if someone went to high school because they've listed it, so they've told me too much in like the 80s, but they just got a college degree. So that lets me know, I can't really tell how old they are, but if I thought, in that year, if they graduated high school, they were probably 18-ish to today, that might give me an idea on that. So does that answer your question, Charles?
If you want us to speak on it more or have any clarifying questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat anytime. Yeah. I'll make sure Corey hears them. All
right. And then this is a newer thing that I have started recommending. And actually a good friend of mine just tried this out and really liked it. And she ended up getting the job that she applied for. So we have all kinds of things that can record us. We can record ourselves on FaceTime or Zoom, or there's a system called Loom. There's all these free things. So interview yourself. Make a video interview of yourself. It sounds silly. It doesn't have to be totally perfect. It's actually okay if it's not perfect, because you're going to review it. The difference is when you're interviewing yourself and watching that again, you get the chance to start over if you need to. And you're not sitting there in front of a panel at an interview like freaking out. So you use a video recording program to interview yourself. A lot of interviews are virtual now. So that's going to help you prepare for that, as well as you're going to have to probably do some virtual interviews. And what I would say for getting started with your interview is to take that job post that you used for your worksheet, and then you've created your resume and prepare for your interview. So you've already researched some of the most used interview questions and you've got your answers ready. You can have somebody ask you those questions if you'd like, or you can ask them of yourself, or you can just answer them. And this is going to help you kind of free up some mind space to be able to answer those hard questions or those specific questions about that job. And it's going to also it's going to lower your stress going in. We all are stressed going into interviews, and any little thing that you can do to relieve that, I hope that we'll do that. And then you can watch your video and you can make observations. You can think of yourself like a recruiter. So one of the first things that I had my friend do is listen for how quickly she spoke on her interview. And I watched this interview and it almost sounded like the end of a car commercial or the end of a pharmaceutical commercial. I really couldn't tell what she was saying because it was so fast. So it lets you also work on your cadence for your interview. And then you're also listening, did you answer the question? So sometimes we get out there and we just don't know how to answer that question. So it lets you see, did I answer that question? Did I give an example? Was it one that I can look back on my resume for? And then what does your background look like? So I have interviewed people in a lot of different settings, but I also have peers that are really sensitive about that. So interviewing in your car might not be the best idea. Interviewing somewhere that has something maybe not that's less tasteful or something in the background. Just make sure that you're in a good place to interview with your background. And then have your interview follow-up questions ready. So those can be more of a blanket question. It could be something like how like performance-wise, how is this job measured? So ask those questions. Just be ready for that, because you do get points in an interview by asking those questions. Any thoughts, ideas? All right. So I wanted to just take a really quick second and explain what an applicant tracking system is. So it's not something that job seekers have much knowledge of or access to. So as a recruiter, as a really busy HR person, I don't review every single thing that comes in. It all is collected through an applicant tracking system. And that's the system that your resume and what you fill out online ends up in with a job posting. And that's what the recruiters or the job managers or hiring managers will pull that resume out of. A lot of companies use them, but you got to be smart with those. So I spoke about like those templates that are really formatted a lot. They got a lot of cover, dark backgrounds. Applicant tracking systems often have issues with that. So I have seen a resume template out there that has a big black stripe down the side of it, and the font is white, but the applicant tracking system only sees a big black stripe. So I get half of a resume. One with 600, 700 resumes are not going to highlight that to see what's on there. They're going to just pass on that one. So just be aware of that. I mean, they're computers, so they have issues. Use a modern format. And this is a newer thing that I've learned. And I know that this PowerPoint breaks the rules, but when you are using like a Times New Roman, for instance, if you look, the letters have little feet on them. It throws off applicant tracking systems. So I would stick to something like Calibri or Arial for those. Plus, those you can kind of shrink up together if you need to find some space a lot easier than some of those formats. AI has entered the space. So with our applicant tracking systems, all I really have to do is put in the title of a job, and through AI, it can write its own job description and it's posting for me. So a lot of companies are using that. But that also gives you the opportunity to use AI and do the same thing. So use AI, put your job into the internet and just see what it says. And that's going to give you an idea of how an applicant tracking system might see that. What happens in an applicant tracking system, and this kind of goes into the next little space. So keywords are really important because the applicant tracking system makes a score. So it's kind of like a scorecard. So it looks at what the keywords are in the job post. It looks at how many are in your job or in your resume. And then it looks at industry wide. And it gives us as recruiters just a score. And it might say, these are your top 10. These are your bottom 10. These are your middle. Now, we still look through those because it is a computer, it is AI, and it is learning. So it is really important to just remember that the first screen is probably not even with a human, and you've got to get your resume through this applicant tracking system first, and making sure those keywords, that's mostly what it drives, is keywords, and that's what's going to get it into the good stack, so to speak, of resumes. And then very carefully review the questions in the application. There are specific questions you've seen like in job posts, and a lot of them have to do with what's in the job description itself. So it might be something about a credential you need or some sort of licensure. So if you're applying for a job and you don't have that license, and you put that you don't have that license, that applicant tracking system could be set to just automatically send you a decline letter because you don't meet the qualifications. So really pay attention to those questions and be truthful on those questions as well. There's nothing worse than getting an interview having to explain that you don't have that. So, be truthful on that. Just watch those questions and really answer those, and make sure that you do those. If it has a writing sample, you might have to do a writing sample in there. So just make sure you're being aware of that, and that should really help your applicant or your application get through the applicant system and over to a recruiter. And that was the last that I had. I know that I tried to not info dump on you guys for like 30 minutes, but I hope some of what I shared sparks your mind and just give you some ideas on how you're going to approach this, or things like, oh, I never thought about that, or I didn't know an applicant tracking system worked like that. So now you know how to go about those things. We have the internet. I mean, I would encourage everyone on this call to just type in a search, how does an applicant tracking system work? There's a billion videos out there. I would absolutely look at those videos because that's going to give you the tips on what it is or what systems are out there. And a lot of those presentations online are through recruiters, and they do share a lot of things from what they see in the industry. So, these aren't things that I just came up with. These are things that I see a lot through my courses and jobs that I'm screening for. And I'm hoping that this gave everyone just a little bit of a chance that gets your resume to the top of the stack. Any questions or comments, or does anyone have a question about their own resume? I can maybe give some advice on it before we wrap up.
You just want to quickly say thank you so much, Corey. That was so informative.
welcome.
And like you said, it's really valuable to hear about it from someone who has been in the position of looking at resumes, like so many resumes. So yeah, that was super helpful
So
and
many
interesting.
resumes. Yeah. And I do want to share that it's a tough job market, everyone. There's the people out there. So, part of the reason the applicant tracking system is so important is we used to post a job and maybe get 10, 20 resumes. It's not like that anymore. So I may post a job and the next day have 1,000 resumes or several hundred resumes. So, that's the reality of it. And if your resume doesn't have the keywords, then that's the applicant tracking system is going to do what it does. So it's a tool that we use. It's not the only thing we use as recruiters, but it's one of the big ones to make sure that we're getting the most qualified applicants and get our positions hired.
And while we hold on just a sec to see if anyone else might have a question or a comment, just a quick reminder, you are absolutely welcome to send your resume to us at alumni@aspen.edu. We'll proofread it and give you feedback for improvement. And if you need any other resume or cover letter writing or job search resources, please reach out. We have lots that we can help with.
Awesome. And honestly, use that service. Use that service of having the alumni office. People pay hundreds of dollars to have their resumes reviewed. So if you've got a service for free to do that, absolutely use that. And then I was just thinking, I know that I said write a worksheet, but if you just downloaded the slide that I presented, you already have one. You can just fill it in. So I hope that helps too.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Corey, and to everyone who came to the webinar today. It was a really good one. This is going up on YouTube. I will also email it out to everyone. But thanks again, and I hope everyone has a great rest of your day.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.